This DApp of the week, we are looking at the Uniswap exchange. So as ever, starting with the Dappradar website, and this is actually, I've set this to look at the top dApps on Ethereum. So Ethereum is one of the 13 blockchains that we track. And we can see here, this is the kind of the default setting. So we're tracking by number of users, effectively the number of wallets, active wallets, over 24 hours. Let me see here, Uniswap is number 4 with 825 active wallets over the last 24 hours. We could also look at the week. And we can see it's actually number 3 here, 4,700. And then a kind of more important thing actually to look for when you're looking at kind of DeFi or exchange dApps is how much money is going through them, because that's kind of what they're designed to do. They don't typically have necessarily an awful lot of users, although Uniswap does, but it has, over the last week we can see, had $29 million worth of value going through it. If I can get my mouse on this one properly, $13.6 million of that was in the ETH cryptocurrency, and 15.5 million was in other ERC20 tokens. So that gives us kind of an overview. We can look at the specific page here. So this is so this kind of showing us the same data really, but we can also see it's quite nice. We can look back and look at the lifetime of Uniswap. I'm going to switch off volume, so we can just see this line here is the users, the active wallet. So we can see here, started in 2019, a few hundred or so, kind of building up. We start 2020, we're in kind of 200, 300, and then this kind of, we're seeing very rapid growth here. So we've got a peak here of about 2,100 active wallets on May the 18th. So Uniswap is really seeing very strong growth. We could also look at the volume, which is the let's say the amount of value going through it. And we can see here that tends to be much more spiky, but we can see here again typical kind of growth. So in April and May we're seeing a lot of volume, and one of the reasons for that is the kind of DeFi, decentralized finance ecosystem on Ethereum is gaining a lot of momentum, and Uniswap is one of the kind of core components of that. And more recently, Uniswap version 2 has gone live. So we now have Uniswap version 1 and Uniswap version 2. And that's really what we're going to look at today is how those dApps are working. So we'll click on Open dApp to go through. And this is the Uniswap website. Gives us a brief overview here. Uniswap is the fully decentralized protocol for automated liquidity provision on Ethereum. Sounds very complicated. For most people, Uniswap is the simplest way of swapping tokens. So simplest way of swapping the ERC20 tokens that run on Ethereum. So we can go and launch, and this is what we see. So this is Uniswap version 2. We'll go into a little detail about kind of what the changes are. And there's also Uniswap version 1. So we can see here 2 different color schemes, a kind of a night, or you can even change these here if you want that switch. But there we go. So this is what most people, when most people come and use Uniswap, because it's very simple. Obviously we get the reminder, this project is in beta, use at your own risk. That's pretty much the same for any dApp running on any blockchain. So never put in more value, never put in more money than you're not happy to lose, but never put in more value than you can afford to lose. These things are obviously experimental. But basically what we can do, we have to connect our wallet. So I'm going to connect my MetaMask wallet, which is the standard browser, Chrome browser wallet. So we just have to, make that connection, and now Uniswap can see how much ETH I've got in my wallet. I've got 0.22. So if I wanted to swap 0.1 ETH, I could then select a token. So I could swap it from Ethereum to wrapped Ether to DAI, the stable coin, to suddenly you can see all manner of these tokens, most of which are rather obscure. But one of the reasons that Uniswap has got very successful is it covers a lot of this stuff. So if you're setting up a project, you can easily add your project to Uniswap and allow people to kind of swap in and out of tokens. Obviously, the other thing, you can go the other way around. So I could select a token if I've got some DAI, $10 worth of DAI, and so I could swap my DAI back to ETH, or I could swap my DAI for something obscure like the Revie interest-bearing DAI, if I wanted to. So that's kind of the basic thing that's going on with Uniswap. We could go to Uniswap version 2. Actually, broadly, in terms of this swap mechanic, works in exactly the same way. So there's no difference there really. Uniswap 2 does have some quite big differences, but for most users, unless you're kind of getting clever, it is pretty straightforward. The other option is send. So you could, if you wanted to, you could send some of your ETH or some of your tokens that you have in your wallet. You could send them to another wallet. Or an ESN name. An ESN name is an Ethereum name service, so that's just a wallet address that has a name on it, so you could buy if you had your name. It's basically a way of making things easier rather than having these long numbers and digits wallet addresses. You could even send it and swap it at the same time. So I could add a swap, so I could take my ETH and swap it to DAI and then send the result of that off to someone else. One interesting thing that we have with Uniswap is pooling. So pool is basically how Uniswap works. So Uniswap is an exchange where you are kind of swapping between two tokens. Now, how most exchanges work, how most centralized exchanges work, is if I want to swap some ETH for some DAI, obviously. Not obviously, but how most of them work is that they then have to match that with someone else. So someone else has to want to swap DAI for ETH, and then we work out the price that we're prepared to do it at. So that's how most exchanges work. So something like Binance would work. They just have a massive, what they call order book, and that's all the trades that people want to do across the different tokens. And then if you come in and want to make a trade, then it tries to match you. With Uniswap, it's very different. What they have is they have a pool. So you have a pool of tokens. So in the case of Ethereum and DAI, if I wanted to swap those, all you need in this liquidity pool is some ETH and some DAI. So, and then that allows the transfer between those two to happen. Obviously, if I'm putting in my ETH and getting DAI out, then more ETH is added to the liquidity pool, and I get some DAI out, so there's less DAI. But what you can do as an individual is you can join a pool or even create a pool if there's not one available. And a pool is just a collection of these tokens that allow people to swap between them. So if I wanted to put in, if I wanted to join a pool and I wanted to join the ETH DAI pool, I would have to put in an equal amount of ETH and DAI, and I would add those. It's basically they would come out of my wallet and get locked into the Uniswap protocol, and then as those are traded, I would get a very small margin, so I think 0.3% of the trade. So when you make a trade, there's a very small fee you're paying, and that goes to the people who are providing the liquidity. So that's kind of how Uniswap works. And if you want to, I mean, it's again not necessarily recommended. It's more advanced, but when you add liquidity, you get pool tokens. These represent your share of the pool, and that's how you kind of effectively can earn what we call passive income. It is quite complicated because obviously you're putting in two tokens, and the price of those tokens could change. So you don't always make money because effectively you've locked in two tokens, and the price of those the relative value between those two tokens can change. So you can sometimes lose lose money. It's not clearly not just the case of winning. But that's the other thing Uniswap version 1 and 2 do. So there is a slight difference here, and we can look here. So should point out Uniswap 1 and 2 are different. They have different liquidity pools. So it's asking me up here, do I want to migrate my liquidity? So if I have if I've put money into tokens into a pool in version 1, it's saying, do I want to move them to version 2? So there is this kind of backwards compatibility kind of issue being worked out at the moment. But let's also read the blog post and go into a bit more detail about just why Uniswap version 2 has launched, because it is interesting, although for most people, as I say, it won't really be very, very relevant. So, new features and technical improvements. So we can see here there's ERC20, ERC20 pairs, price oracles, flash swaps. So what was I talking about before? So this is the migration portal. So you can, as we were saying before, you can withdraw your liquidity from version 1 and put it in version 2. Updated interface. Okay, let's go through this. Okay, there's some more analytics that you can look at uniswap.info, so you can see what's going on. So the main difference here is, so there's this, previously in Uniswap version 1, if you're going to go into the liquidity pool, you had to put in ETH and the other ERC20 token. So that was the only way you could do it. In version 2, you could just put in 2 ERC20 tokens. So it's just more flexible in creating pools. So instead of me putting in ETH and DAI, I could now put in DAI and, let's say, Maker, the Maker token. So I could put that in instead of it always swapping, me always having to put in ETH and another token. So it just makes it kind of simpler to do. Price oracles are interesting. They're very much behind the scenes, but a price oracle is basically how something works out, how a blockchain DApp works out the price of tokens. So there's lots of interesting research going on because it's very important about how you create oracles, which are basically things that can be trusted to tell what the price is. This is important, certainly in an exchange, because if you get the pricing wrong, then obviously people can get things at a cheaper value, and there's been quite a lot of interesting actions happening around people trying to kind of spoof price oracles or hack price oracles. And then flash swaps again are again complicated really for coders, but it's a way of people being able to access large amounts of liquidity without having to pay for it in order to do some kind of complicated extra transactions. So these are not for all of these three kind of big additions to Uniswap version 2 are not really something that certainly I will be using, but they are important for the wider Ethereum DeFi ecosystem, because if you are a coder, this is useful if you're using Uniswap as a foundational protocol in order to do something in your DApp. So these are kind of important, but they're not really important for users.